am a writer. Writing books is my profession, but it's more than that, of course. It is also my great lifelong love and fascination. And I don't expect that that's ever going to change. But that said, something kind of peculiar has happened recently in my life and in my career, which has caused me to have to sort of recalibrate my whole relationship with this work. And the peculiar thing is that I recently wrote this book, this memoir called Eat, Pray, Love, which decidedly, unlike any of my previous books, went out in the world for some reason and became this big mega sensation, international bestseller thing, the result of which is that everywhere I go now, people treat me like I'm doomed. Seriously, doomed. Like, they come up to me now, like, all worried, and they say, aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid you're never going to be able to top that? Aren't you afraid you're going to keep writing for your whole life and you're never again going to create a book that anybody in the world cares about at all, ever again? So that's reassuring, you know. But it would be worse, except for that I happen to remember that over 20 years ago, when I first started telling people when I was a teenager that I wanted to be a writer, I was met with this same kind of sort of fear-based reaction, and people would say, aren't you afraid you're never going to have any success? Aren't you afraid the humiliation of rejection will kill you? Aren't you afraid that you're going to work your whole life at this craft and nothing's ever going to come of it and you're going to die on a scrap heap of broken dreams with your mouth filled with bitter ash of failure? Like that, you know? And the answer, short answer to all those questions is yes. Yes, I'm afraid of all those things. And I always have been, and I'm afraid of many, many more things besides that, you know, people can't even guess at, like seaweed and other things that are scary. But when it comes to writing, the thing that I've been sort of thinking about lately and wondering about lately is why, you know? Is it rational? Is it logical that anybody should be expected to be afraid of the work that they feel they were put on this earth to do, you know? And what is it specifically about creative ventures that seems to make us really nervous about each other's mental health in a way that other careers kind of don't do, you know? Like my dad, for example, was a chemical engineer, and I don't recall once in his 40 years of chemical engineering anybody asking him if he was afraid to be a chemical engineer, you know? It just didn't come, like, got chemical engineering block, John, you know? How's it going? And
I had been hearing about this book for, it seemed like years, because he was just always writing on this thing, and I got a few chapters here and there, and then eventually I got the manuscript, and I mean, it was amazing. But for me, I just thought, I can't wait for people to read this book. But I also started to think about the stories that aren't told. And I feel very thankful to know him as my friend. He's one of my best friends, and I feel like I have gotten to see him in action when people aren't looking. And Bob knows that he is a child of God, and so he's not afraid to do anything. And he really takes to heart that through Christ who strengthens us, we can do anything. And so I'm inspired by that. And so I wanted to write him a song. It's really not about the book, but more it's about him. And so yeah, it was a treat to share it with him.
Ancient Greece and ancient Rome, people did not happen to believe that creativity came from human beings back then, okay? People believed that creativity was this divine attendant spirit that came to human beings from some distant and unknowable source for distant and unknowable reasons.
Go and do that again. Yeah, but right here is where this game is won. Right here on the green. First you got to see it. Sun gonna be there in the morning, over there in the afternoon. Funny thing is, the blades of grass gonna follow the sun. The grain is gonna shift. That same putt gonna go one way in the morning, to other in the afternoon. One way in the morning, the other afternoon. You see that? Yeah, golf course put folk through quite a punishment. It lives and breathes just like us.
You think Junior can win?
Yeah, if he can find his authentic swing.
Authentic?
Go on, hit one more for me. Yep, inside each and every one of us is one true authentic swing. Something we was born with. Something that's ours and ours alone. Something can't be taught to you or learned. Something that got to be remembered. You know, over time, the world can rob us of that swing. It get buried inside us under all our wouldas and couldas and shouldas. Some folk even forget what their swing was like. Some folk even forget what their swing was like. You keep swinging.
But I don't have any balls.
And don't worry about hitting the ball or where it's gonna go. Just swing the club, feel the club. Come on, close your eyes.
Close my...
And you can't make that ball go in that hole. You have to let it. I want you to feel the club, rolling off your feel the weight of the club. Sailing on the perfect line, dropping out that high, soft as butter. Listen to the sounds of the night. Just keep swinging that club till you gotta breathe inside each and see every one of us is one rustling through the tree, authentic swing. Just keep swinging that club till authentic swing, part of the whole thing. Something we was born with. Take a deep breath. That's a good thing. To the sounds of the night.
I don't feel a thing.
Just keep swinging that club until you're part of the whole thing. That's a good thing. Can you see it?
Okay, centuries ago in the deserts of North Africa, people used to gather for these moonlight dances of sacred dance and music that would go on for hours and hours until dawn. And they were always magnificent because the dancers were professionals and they were terrific, right? But every once in a while, very rarely, something would happen and one of these performers would actually become transcendent. And I know you know what I'm talking about because I know you've all seen at some point in your life a performance like this, you know? And it was like time would stop and the dancer would sort of step through some kind of portal, and he wasn't doing anything different than he had ever done, you know, 1,000 nights before, but everything would align, and all of a sudden he would no longer appear to be merely human. You know, he would be like lit from within and lit from below, and all like lit up on fire with divinity. And when this happened back then, people knew it for what it was, you know, they called it by its name. They would put their hands together and they would start to chant, Allah, 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 God, 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 that's God.
All effort is ultimately going into trying to make something that it is effortless. I wish I'd reached this point about an hour ago, before the sun had risen. What is extraordinary that I didn't expect, but could only have dreamt of happening, is that the sun coming from there shines completely on both sides of the rock. So all the icicle is illuminated against that cliff, and I never had any idea that that would happen. So the potential here is fantastic.
The tricky bit comes the next morning, right, for the dancer himself. when he wakes up and discovers that it's Tuesday at 11 a.m. and he's no longer a glimpse of God. He's just an aging mortal with really bad knees, and maybe he's never going to ascend to that height again, and maybe nobody will ever chant God's name again as he spins, and what is he then to do with the rest of his life? This is hard. This is one of the most painful reconciliations to make in a creative life. But maybe it doesn't have to be quite so full of anguish if you never happened to believe in the first place that the most extraordinary aspects of your being came from you. But maybe if you just believed that they were on loan to you. The tricky bit comes the next morning, right, for the dancer himself, when he wakes up and discovers that it's Tuesday at 11 a.m. and he's no longer a glimpse of God. He's just an aging mortal with really bad knees, and maybe he's never going to ascend to that height again.